Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. Hello, David Guthrie back with yet another episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives. And here I have the pleasure of chatting with my friend Karen McGregor, who is in Mexico. And there seems to be a pattern here. I interviewed Helen Wilkie, and she is in Buenos Aires. So there's something about being outside of Canada that seems to be striking my fancy today. So first of all, welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much. Good to be here with you, David.
And Karen, just before we started, you offered something that I thought was quite intriguing. Maybe a starting point was that the place that you're currently living in Mexico, you love it there because people seem to be more concerned or more interested in relationships than in success. So maybe you could say just a little bit more about that and what that's like.
Sure. Well, when I first moved here a couple of years ago, I was very much identified with what I do for a living, being in business and just the whole thing that comes with that, being an entrepreneur and having a team and the successes of that. And so when I came here, the first thing that I noticed was both Spanish-speaking people indigenous to this land and also the people who moved here from different parts of the world, Europe, North America. Mexico is part of North America, so my mistake there. But, the States and Canada, everyone were the same. They all had the same goal, and that was just to get to know me. They didn't ask, who are you in terms of what do you do? They're just asking, who are you in terms of your beingness? And it was just such a lightning bolt for me because even yesterday I went for a beautiful walk along the lake. I live on Lake Chapala. And there were many Mexican families along the lake who were doing things like their one had a birthday party, another one they had set up, a beautiful place to eat and to laugh, and there was music, and some people set up tents, and there were kids riding their bikes and dogs, and it was just such a beautiful testament to being in relationship with each other just for the sake of being, not that you have to prove anything or you have to have some kind of a goal or transaction. It was just for the sake of beingness. And maybe some of you out there are saying, well, that's my everyday life. But I can tell you that it certainly wasn't mine. I don't even remember knowing most of my neighbors back home in just outside of Vancouver, and being really sad about that today. Not myself, not reaching out and forming those relationships with people who are a part of my community. So yeah, that was a big transition moment for me. And it's something that I'm very passionate about now, in the new business that I'm forming and transitioning into.
So I want to come back to that in just a moment, but I'm just curious, did you move to that part of Mexico because people were interested in relationships, or is that something that you discovered once you got there?
Well, I can tell you, I've been to many different cities and towns in Mexico, and it's the same wherever you go. People, it's, when you're finished work, as an example here, the first thing people will do is open up their homes to their family, their cousins, aunts, uncles. Let's have some dinner together. And often these parties go long into the night. I remember attending a birthday party of one of my Mexican friends. And, I kept looking at the watch thinking, well, it's been 3 hours now. So maybe it's time to go home. But, I resisted the urge and realized that, the party wasn't even really getting started at 3 hours in.
Oh.
So I love it here because people know how to have fun. They know how to connect with each other. They are very gracious about sharing their food. What little they have, they will share with you,
Hmm.
and always so welcoming. So I really appreciate that, and I'm learning from it to take back home to Canada as well. To shift maybe other people's perspectives around what it means to be connected.
So, one of the nice things I like about that is it feels very, I mean, the word authentic gets overplayed and overused, but it very real. In contrast, I've been listening for the last few days to Jimmy Buffett, and it's kind of an artificial thing that's placed on top of that. And I love sort of the authenticity of this. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about what you're bringing back to Canada, what you've realized, and how that's shifting what you're going to be doing in the world.
Sure. Well, I had to take a really deep look into my own past and how I perceived relationships and connections, and I was always more of an artist growing up, like an artistic girl, and needed lots of quiet space in order to create. I loved writing, I loved reading, so I was naturally that way. But things had happened in my life where, being a very sensitive child, I I started to withdraw. And
Mm,
one of the things I've learned here is, um, what my go-to is to withdraw all the time.
mm,
So it's become what I call going from pure power of, wow, I'm a creator, I'm so passionate, to, oh wow, I'm withdrawing from everybody. I'm scared to have a conversation, to get drawn into a conversation, rather than to look at it like, wow, there's an opportunity to meet someone new. And a lot of people think, well, Karen, you've spoken on big stages. You even got to speak on a stage with Tony Robbins. That's so exciting. You must be so at ease with the whole idea of meeting new people and opportunities, and that nothing could be further from the truth, you see, because when you're on a stage, you can hide, you can you can be connected to people, but you don't have to really deeply connect one to one. You can do a very good job and still hide from your people. And so I learned while I was here how very much, um, there were reasons for why I was a withdrawer, so to speak. There were reasons for why I isolated, that came from my childhood. So I started to look more deeply into that. And because I'm a creator and I'm an observer, I started to observe that we all have what I call power patterns, fractured power. So we start off with beautiful, pure power as babies,
mm.
and we have certain tendencies that are beautiful, and then they become fractured because of things that, not because of what happened, but how we perceive what happened. And so for myself, I won't get into those details, but suffice it to say that when a sensitive artist is in a chaotic environment, it makes sense that that person would withdraw so much that they wouldn't actually enjoy relationships and close contact with people and really developing a true intimacy. And so when I got divorced and I found myself, alone also in my business, I had at that time going through my divorce, I also had a divorce, so to speak, from my business partners. And so all that to say that, yes, that was quite a while ago, but it was the first, what I call the first red flag. I I need to look at this. I need to look deeper into this. Why am I separating? And so this is the work that I'm developing today is how can we as human beings stop separating both from ourselves and from other people? I have friends right now who they don't speak to certain people in their lives who I think, wow, that's so sad that we don't speak anymore. And even if we do speak, many people, colleagues, people in high up positions in organizations, they admit, we hate each other, or we're so irritated by each other that it's hard to go to work happy. And yeah, so that those are the kinds of things I'm looking at now, and because of my own experience.
So let me dive into a couple of things here. So first of all, it sounds like what you're talking about withdrawing. It's because some people might think, well, that's just, an extrovert becoming an introvert. And I think it's quite different from that and the way that you're describing it. And how would you distinguish the two, the difference between introvert, extrovert, and pulling back, and the kind of pulling back that you're describing that sounds, much deeper?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. Because I think it's really important that we recognize what is our healthy power and what is going towards unhealthy power. So if I use myself as an example, if I say today I'm going to spend 3 hours alone writing my book, my next book, and I set parameters around that. And, if anybody comes in, I just say, sorry, this is my time to create. However, if those same people, let's say it's my child, I remember when Matthew was 3 years old and I was busy thinking about business. How often do we say we're busy and we're really just thinking about something? And he was tugging at he was 3, he was tugging at my leg, crying. And he said, Mommy, you never listen to me anymore.
Wow. Hmm.
And so it still makes me cry to this day because we can withdraw so much that we're not only hurting ourselves, we're hurting other people. And so I call that type of power, a fractured power, an armadillo, uh, because they really start to develop a shell, not only to retreat, but of hardness, of almost saying, I can't be with people, so I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to withdraw into my creations, and usually that's what armadillos do. They withdraw into their creations. And so friendships, outings, social outings, times when you're at work and you think, all I want is to have that door closed and nobody to walk through it. And I thought that was healthy at one time. And now I realize, of course, that it was harming me and it was harming them because they thought I don't, I didn't like them. There's something wrong with them. And then there's that power dynamic depending on their wounds, of course, as well.
So then I want to dive into another thing you said about, where people don't have the conversations and they can be painful. And, I know that I have probably maintained more relationships without value, right? They're toxic. And, what's the difference between having relationships, just legitimate, authentic relationships with people that are in your world versus pruning some of those relationships that don't actually nourish you, or is there a difference? My head's kind of spinning a little bit on this one.
Yeah. Well, I think we all encounter toxic relationships in order to understand ourselves better. Because I think we do actually always attract that which we need to learn about. And it might be a very uncomfortable learning. Many people say, get rid of the toxic people in your life. And actually on social media, you will see that advice over and over again. Just get rid of them. And for me, I I just don't have that. I don't have it in me to say you should get rid of people because those people are acting that way for a reason. First of all, can we attempt to understand that person's behavior? We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to even engage in it. But I think that we can attempt to understand it. And that's what I call true compassion. When your body, your mind is completely irritated by that person, but at the same time, imagine them as young children, babies. What was their environment like? How were they shaped? In fact, a lot of research, Gabor Mate in particular, he says that people literally, if they have enough chaos in their life and enough commotion when they're younger, they literally cannot, they have no choice in their brains, in their wiring, to do anything other than what they are doing. Now, that may not be true for all of us, and I don't think it is true for all of us, but it's something to consider when we're thinking, okay, I'm going to block that person. I hate the way they're talking to me and talking to other people. I honestly think that by doing those things on a mass scale, like on social media, I think it hurts us as humans, because what are we doing? We're just separating. And isn't the goal to come together? So every time that we push someone away, we're contributing to humanity's problem of separating. And you see it everywhere, of course, on social media. It's all about separation, whether it's a gentle form of separation or a severe form. But we see that right now, and so that would be my unusual advice versus the easy road. But I do think we also need to respect ourselves, and if somebody is attacking us, of course, we do want to respect ourselves. And what does that look like? But it doesn't look like attacking the other person.
I'm seeing and hearing more in business literature as well about the importance of love and coming to things from a love perspective, and with that perspective, I can if I come and look at someone with a lens of love on, it doesn't mean that I have to like them, right? But it's a different way of interacting with them, just starting with that premise, right?
I have a great story about that. I remember being just a couple of years ago, maybe more than that. Yeah, pre-COVID. Um, I had just finished a wonderful talk and I was feeling really great. And well, one of my colleagues was sitting next to me, and there was a woman sitting across from her, so across from both of us, and she was talking nonstop. And of course, me, the armadillo, you know, we don't like people who talk a lot, right? So I was thinking, oh my God, I don't like this woman. She just won't shut up. Oh, and on and on. My thoughts were just like, just get me out of here. And and what I witnessed taught me a huge lesson. My colleague, her name's Laurie, she reached over to this lady across the table and put her hand on top of her hand. And whatever she was talking about, it was some complaint. Um, she said, Wow, that must have been really difficult for you. And she said it with such presence and such compassion that the woman literally took a deep breath, said one more thing, and then it was quiet.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's powerful.
it's
Very
so
powerful.
powerful because in my mind, I wanted to separate from her. And
Hmm.
in my colleague Larie's mind, she wanted to come and understand this woman and be there for her and just be there for her.
You know, it's been said over many years that all behavior makes sense to that person, and it's having the care and the compassion to come at that from that perspective, that this person isn't intentionally trying to be obnoxious and consume air and space like that, but just to make that human connection that you're talking about. And the touch is so important. And you know, these days we're so concerned about inappropriately touching someone, right? And it
Yeah.
makes it really hard to make those connections. But sometimes we have to take that risk. We have to take that risk.
It's
So,
part of, I think that touch is part of being present to someone. It's so much easier to be present to someone if you put your hand on their shoulder, give them a hug, or put your hand on top of their hand while you're speaking. It it's such a small thing, but it grounds both the listener and the talker.
and trust that your clear intention comes through, right? So
Mhm.
so Karen, if you're willing to do so, you've got another book coming. I'll certainly put your current book in the program notes, but is there anything about your future book that people should be looking forward to? Or do you want to keep it quiet
Well,
at this point?
it's so new that just a week ago I woke up with all of the just at 3 in the morning. I woke up at 3 in the morning, and all the chapters were there. I just had to write them down, and so it's done. But it's a book about an unusual perspective around clarity. And again, this is from my 2 years being in Mexico. I was so upset that I just couldn't get clear on the next phase of my life. You know, who am I without my business, without my home in Canada, which I sold, without my car, without my belongings? Who am I without, the title of international speaker and best best this and that and just the accolades and the accomplishments. Who am I without any of that? And so when I started to attempt to get clear, I used various methods that we all, if we've done this kind of work, we know, we're familiar with those methods, different questions that you ask yourself and whatnot. But my book is completely different and really talks about what true clarity is and why many people that we meet are perpetually unclear about where they're headed and about their life. Because David, I used to have a business where people would come to me for clarity. And I had assumed at that time, well, if I just do this, this, and this to help them, voila, they're going to take off and everything will be exactly as I had predicted it would be. And I was so frustrated that most of the time that didn't happen. And it wasn't until I moved here to Mexico that I realized, there's something much deeper going on when people are not clear about their path than we think it is. And it's not just business path. I'm also referring to any big decision, any big choice in life, and why we sometimes feel stuck for longer than we need to feel that way. So I'm really excited about it. Just unconventional wisdom around clarity.
I would say conventional wisdom probably isn't wisdom, but that's a whole other topic.
True.
So if you were going to suggest something that our listeners could just start thinking about that would help them, what might that be? Just, one question, just start with this one. That may be unfair to ask you that question, but it's my podcast.
Sure. Well, getting back to what we talked about earlier in terms of relationships, I feel that if we want to be happy, but also whether we work for someone or we have our own business, we always have to ask ourselves, what is it that's getting in the way of me happily proceeding towards what I want? What is it that's really getting in the way? Because we can make up a very surface level answer. Well, it's those damn suppliers, you know, or, my wife, gosh, all she ever does is complain and it brings me down. And no wonder I'm not where I want to be, because I've got this energy around me all the time. And so I guess what I'm suggesting is that most of us point to something that could be our reality, but it's a very surface answer. So trying to go deeper on that question, I think I would invite people to observe yourself and start to reflect through that observation, not through a simple, here's the answer, but really start to watch yourself. Just like I watched myself when I got here and everybody wanted to be friends with me and I didn't want to be friends. It was like, oh my God, that's going to impede on my space and my time. And yeah. And now I think, wow, I thought that was normal. And perhaps that's a good place for us all to reflect is what we think is normal is not necessarily good for us.
So that gives people lots to think about between now and the next episode of this podcast, Karen. That's very helpful. And for those of you that, and unfortunately this is just an audio podcast because you wouldn't see that Karen is actually glowing, a nice gentle glow, which is quite wonderful. And, should we all have the opportunity to have that in our lives? So I would like to thank you, Karen, very much for taking the time today from Mexico to take part in this podcast. And I wish you well and look forward to hearing about when your new book comes out.
Well, thank you so much, David. And I know that we all so appreciate you over the years. And I think for me, you're a model of someone who is a beautiful person in relationship. Any of us who know you, you're just such a what I call in your pure power, and you're genuinely interested in others. You're compassionate with others, and you ask great questions. And I always love when people ask great questions because it's better than having great answers, David. So thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure. And this is David Guthrow on Discover Fresh Perspectives. Subscribe now because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.